This is wonderful turnout, and I thank you all for coming out on this beautiful evening to listen to our World War II veterans talk and share their stories. I would first like to introduce Harriet Swanson, her husband Ralph Swanson, and Forrest Johnson, all from the area. I have little name tags here, so later if you want questions or anything, I've got them up here. Everybody was in a different part of the war here. Harriet was mostly in England, France, and Germany, and Europe. Ralph was in North Africa, and Forrest was in the South Pacific and Iwo Jima. Yep. And I just want to make note also, there are World War II veterans and Vietnam veterans and Korean War veterans pictures of people out in the library. So after the program, if you'd like to go and see the pictures out there, and some of them are no longer with us, and some are in here right now in the room, in the audience. So feel free to do that as well. One of our customers here at the library brought in a number of items from World War II and a couple of the other wars. All that is on display in the Sullivan Room, so after the program, Stu will be back there, and if you'd like to just walk around and look at different things. And also, Harriet and Ralph and Forrest have their items from the war here, too. And then also, I just wanted to mention, in 2 weeks, we also have another tie-in program to James Bradley's appearance. That we'll have a movie of Flags of Our Fathers. And we have the little reminder brochures at front. Also, his books are for sale outside too. If you are planning to come to the James Bradley program, you can buy a book here in advance, and then when you go to the program, you can have him sign it. They're paperback. And just a reminder that if you haven't bought your ticket yet, there are still tickets for sale for the James Bradley program on June 30th. Okay, tonight we will start with Harriet. I always say ladies first. and Harriet can explain the things that she brought from the war, and Ralph and Forrest will all thoroughly enjoy what you have to say tonight, and we'll have questions then after too. I'm sure a lot of you have questions and whatnot. So, okay, Harriet, and I have I have the microphone on this end, but I do have a microphone right here.
Right here?
I'll plug that, or it's already plugged in.
Okay. First of all, I want to say this, that when you get to be my age, which is 96, sometimes your ears don't work right and your eyes don't work right. So tonight, we brought our ears and our eyes alone. And I'm going to introduce them. You probably know Joanne Hazy. Joanne, will you stand up? Joanne is a librarian, and she volunteers. She volunteers at the Presque Isle Library. And our son Jim is a chemical engineer, and he just retired. Jim, will you stand up? Stand up. They're supposed to be our eyes and our ears, but they're way back there. I don't know. Well, now, shall I start with me?
Sure.
I think Janelle wants me to give you a little rundown of where I was. Right after I graduated from nursing, well, we heard that Pearl Harbor had been bombed. And so there were 3 of us. Is that okay? Can you hear okay?
I have a little clip right here. I can put on you.
Should I put that on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where?
I have a good voice without
You sure do.
You as well. Well, anyway, so the three of us decided, three nurses, that we would go in the service together, because then we'd be together all. And it was just at the time, remember when the Sullivan boys, how many remember the Sullivans? See? And they went down, and after that, they would not allow any friends or relatives to go together. So I went overseas, my other friend went on a hospital ship, and one stayed here in the States. So we never saw one another until after the war. But then I went to England, and we were getting ready for D-Day. And I worked in the operating room all through the war, and we'd have what they call dry runs. We would think that so many patients were coming in. So we never knew for sure if it was D-Day or not. But on D-Day, we did know it was D-Day because the whole sky was black with planes coming over and going back. And then our hospital took in the first casualties. And I think they said that we took in something like 36,000 casualties. It's hard to remember. And then, shortly after D-Day, after they had a beachhead, our unit went over to Utah Beach. And we went on what they call an LCI. If you're veterans, you know what an LCI, that's a landing craft infantry. And so we went over on that, and we got there at night. And we had to take our, we called it musette bags, and walk through. And I have some pictures of, and we landed on Utah Beach. And when we landed on the beach, we knew that we were in a war because there were helmets were floating, and it was awful. But anyway, so we landed at a place called Le Mans, St. Mary Gallice. Did any of you here go to Europe?
Sorry.
Oh, then do you know where St. Mary Gallice is? Oh, you want me to hold it?
Yeah.
Okay, modern technology. Okay, so we landed in St. Mary Gallice, and when we were there, the people were very nice to us, but we didn't stay because they wanted us to go to another place called Le Mans, France. And there we set up in tents, and we operated out of these tents. And something interesting about St. Mary Gallice, this is 71 years later now, and this last summer I got a letter, I got it here, from a little girl, from a teacher in St. Mary Gallice, and she said that a friend of theirs was coming over on an airplane and asked if he knew me. I don't know who it was, I would like to know. But anyway, so she wrote this letter, and she said every year St. Mary Gallice honors D-Day because they don't want their children to forget about the war. And I think I have the letter here somewhere. Anyway, what else did we do? After we were in this tent, well, Paris wasn't liberated yet then. And so as soon as Paris was liberated, then our hospital went into Paris, and we took care of the patients there. And at the Battle of the Bulge, we were the first hospital. As a matter of fact, I'm sure you all know this, if we had lost the Battle of the Bulge, we might have lost our country. But anyway, we won that war. I don't know what else would be interesting. I think that's about all. I was over there for, I have a book on D-Day, and it shows Utah Beach where we landed. And you may look at that later.
Harriet?
Yeah?
One of the things I think is so interesting is when you talk about going into Germany and that you had to treat Nazi soldiers as well as American soldiers.
Oh, yes. We were in France, And as you know, in the war, you had to be over there so long. And I didn't pick up our unit. Our unit mobilized in Kansas City, but I didn't pick them up until Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. So I was there later. So after the war, I was sent to Berlin, Germany. And it was interesting because then we took care of American soldiers. I worked in the operating room. We took care of American soldiers and German soldiers. And so many people had said, could you tell the difference? You never can tell the difference. And we used to wonder at that time, because they were young people, 17, 18 years old. And I guess that's, but anyway, we took care of the Germans and the Americans. That's after the war. I guess, you can see this, when the war was over, it says it's over here. That was the only communication we had was by the Morse code. How many of you even know what the Morse code is? That dates us, but anyway, the Morse code, and we had to know the Morse code. That's the only communication besides the stars and stripes. And that would come out. And this was the copy of the Stars and Stripes the day that was over. You can see that later. Well, I think that's about all I have to say. We can answer questions later. I'll do that, Ralph. And Ralph came up. I came up from England, France, and Germany. And Ralph came up. Well, he'll tell you. You can tell him.
And Ralph, this will reach you. This will reach you.
I'll move this.
I hope I don't scare you out.
Well, I want to tell one thing, and I think it's very important. I'll use this. I want to show you something. When we went in the service, we were all given a New Testament. They didn't do that anymore. But then the chaplain gathered everyone around and had a service. And he told every single soldier that went into the war, he said, I want you to know if you're in a trench.
Foxhole.
Yes, that's it. If you're there or not, you're never alone. He said, because Jesus is with you wherever you go. And I want you to know that all you have to do is to believe in him. And they gave each one of us a New Testament. And that was very, very important to these young people because they were in trenches and they knew who their Savior was. And I think it's really sad that now you can't even mention the name of Jesus. Anyway, this was mine, and this was Ralph's. Everyone that went in got one. Okay.
There's some interesting stories that people had that New Testament in their show, and a shrapnel or something would hit there and it would deflect and save their life.
Yeah, we've heard many instances of that. Okay.
Well, anyway, I don't know how much time I should take, but I was born and raised in Iron Mountain, Michigan, and I went to school. Am I too loud?
No.
Does that sound better?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Sorry, but anyway, when I was growing up, I was a paper boy, and I would read the headlines, and it was a treacherous time in our country's future, and so I would look at all that, and I said, I wonder if I shouldn't try to do something for our country. So I planned, that year I got out of high school, I went to Fort Brady, and I was in a civilian military training camp. And then following that, I went to school. My dad found enough money so I could go to Michigan Tech. And I went through the Michigan Tech, and I took ROTC. And after 4 years, when I graduated, I went through the line and got my degree. And on the next time, and you go through this line and got your degree, and then down here one more step, and here was another man, and he gave me a commission that I had earned. So he said, "I'll give you 3 days to get your affairs in order." And I reported down to Fort Sheridan, and the next thing I know, I was on a troop train, and I remember going by Atlanta, and I wondered, well, how in the world, where are they planning on taking me? But anyway, I found out that they had reserved some of the railroad tracks for the military, and that's the only ones that were open. And so, as I finally got up to Fort Dix, and that was a staging area, and that I graduated on the 15th and got my degree, and the same time I got a commission, and on the 30th of June of the same month, I was on a boat going overseas. And then oh, this is all right, this is interesting. And about, I think just shortly after that, we landed in England. I had no idea where we were going. We went through the North Shore, or the North Atlantic, and all we could see was fog and a few ships, and a destroyer and a cruiser. Something was that was our friend here can tell you about that. But anyway, we got over there safely for whatever reason, and there was submarines out because our whole east coast was patrolled by German submarines. And when we got into Scotland, we were in a quarantine on the ship harbor for about 3 days, and then the next day we were on a train going south, and we ended up on the south coast of England. And I said, "No, I'm too young to go over there." I could see, could almost visualize the coast and the fog there. And so then, I was trying to get my thoughts together. But anyway, right then, they diverted us over to Taunton, which was a city like the headquarters or the capital of the little province of Taunton. And sometimes it gets kind of emotional, so you have to bear with me. But anyway, when we finally arrived in Taunton, we were just starting to build Quonset huts. I was with an engineering corps, and we did a lot of building. We weren't armed to fight, but we never had to. We just were set aside to do that. We'd lay our weapons down and build, and they kept us very busy. So we'd work sometimes 20 hours a day, and so that's the way it went. I guess I don't have too much to say. But anyway,
Tell them about building bridges.
in Italy, we were building bridges for the infantry and the other cavalry coming through, and they had more rivers and more places to cross, there's creeks and everything, than any war in history. And we went from one bridge to another, and I ended up, I could see bridges in my sleep. I think maybe one thing I told Harriet, what did I tell you about that?
When that boulders kept coming down.
We were down there in the bottom, we were putting in a bridge, and I could see the trestles that were up about 100 feet. And these were the platforms that the other bridge sat on. And so they had plenty of clearance between the top and the bottom. But anyway, I kept watching that, and I saw lightning and everything up in the mountains, and then it started to rain. And we had to pick up our tools and get out of there. By the time we got up on the shore a little bit, there was everything, boulders and everything were rolling down that stream bed. And we had tied our bridge up with a cable. It went upstream about 150 feet. And then we anchored it 2 ways. And when that boulders and everything hit that bridge, it somehow held together. And it went way up about 20 feet. And it survived the crash. And when it came down, it came right back down on the footings. It saved us a lot of work. But anyway, that was about the extent.
Tell us about North Africa.
Oh, okay.
Oh, tell them about when you made the tents and the African children took your.
Oh, well, we didn't have tents, but we had those shelter hats. And if you couldn't partner, you just have to lay out in the rain. The partner that you would find had to have the other half of the tent. That was fun anyway.
Tell them about when the kids took your tent.
Oh. But anyway, these little North Africans didn't really have much home life or training or anything, but they would steal everything that would fall down, anything that would get out of the sight there, they'd grab it and run with it. And they even stole our barracks bags that we carry our things in. And this one guy had this barracks bag on, and he had it on, and I could see this, one of my buddies, his barracks bag was going over the hill. I could read his name on the back.
That about it?
That's about it.
Thank you, Forrest.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Forrest Johnson. I'm a World War II veteran, and I say I'm honored to be on the same platform as these two youngsters here tonight. I just figured it out that between the three of us, among the three of us, we're 270 some years of age. That's a lot of time. My story, I'm going to try to share with you from the viewpoint of just what a very, very young boy would look like even this year as graduates from Lakeland High School are leaving, because that's what I was when I went into the service in 1943. The war, as you know, was a two-front war. You've got both fronts here. I was in the South Pacific for the last half of it, which was the most vicious battles of all, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and all of those. And these people were over in the European theater. And America rose, as you know, from its bootstraps after the horrible attack on December 7th, 1941, when the Japanese cowardly came in and destroyed our naval base at Pearl Harbor. That was one of the most infamous acts of history that we know of. And America came up very fast to reply, and we did. By the time I got in early 1943, the war was raging in Europe more. And although the Japanese had occupied almost all of the islands in the South Pacific, if you could picture the South Pacific, you would see it like the stepping stones of all the way from Pearl Harbor right up to Tokyo itself. I graduated in 1943, and every single male in my class of about 150 at Kingsford High School in Iron Mountain, by the way. I'm from Iron Mountain, as you were, I understand.
Really?
Yes, what a coincidence. We all enlisted early, so we never had the privilege or honor of walking with caps and gowns down the aisle. We were gone by April of that spring. And it was a memorable thing to see a whole class of young men. Every able one of them had enlisted in one branch of the service or the other. And we marched down to a train in Iron Mountain, Michigan, and jumped on and away we went. I had enlisted in the Navy before I had finished graduating, and we all graduated early. They had a kind of a special ceremony. But my life was changed very much by my involvement in the military. I had a choice between submarines and destroyers. Both are pretty much a devilish machine, and I failed the physical for submarines because I couldn't stand the high pressure. Being a Scandinavian like the three of us are here, my capillaries were too close and my nose started to bleed, so they said, you're gonna have to go on a destroyer, no submarine for you. But it was an adventure that I shall never forget. Being young and kind of stupid, I looked at it as an adventure, not afraid at all. There was no fear in the young men then. We were ready to go. By the way, I'd like to recognize all my fellow vets here that I see a lot of them here, and comrades in arms from different wars. They talked about World War II being the war to end all wars. That certainly wasn't the case, was it? We went from there to Korea to Vietnam, and I know there are vets right here like Paul Lemkilo who served in that era, and others in here tonight. Brian Jopic from the Lakeland Times is here. And these men are all veterans, and some women too. To trace my history of my life, I brought a model of a destroyer. I was assigned to a destroyer, a brand new, beautiful 3,000-ton destroyer that was commissioned in Seattle, Washington. And after having some basic training at Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and then into gunnery school in California for about 8 weeks, I was quickly assigned to this destroyer and spent the rest of my 2.5 to 3 years, close to 3 years, in the South Pacific. That's a long time to be away from home when you're only 18. But anyway, we left Pearl Harbor after getting assigned to a huge task force called Task Force 58. And by that time, America had risen by the bootstraps and had a tremendous fleet built up. It's amazing how fast from Pearl Harbor's destruction to when I went in that the Navy and Army and Marines had gathered 10 million men under arms. There aren't many of us left like us now. World War II vets are very, very rare. What did I read? Some of them are dying at 1,000 a day. That's not a very happy thought. We're among them, where we were. Yeah, but it's a privilege to have served in the military, and I was happy to have gone in and spent part of my life there. After my basic training, little did I realize that I was going to be part of three of the most historic battles that ever occurred in the South Pacific. A destroyer is, as its name implies, a fighting machine that there's nothing like it on the high seas. And I brought a model of one just to show you sort of where my life was to be for the next 2.5 years. I think you can all hear me, can't you? Okay. This is a model my son and I built of a 3,000-ton destroyer, and it was nothing but armament. It was an absolute killing machine. And I was a gunner's mate, so I had chosen to be not down below the decks, but up where I was to be doing gunnery action. This was my station on this big 5-inch cannon right here. And I sat in this little turret. I don't know if you can see that, but it's called a blast shield. And I was a gun captain on that gun, and therefore had a first-class view of everything that went on for me for the next 3 years. I wasn't hidden in the bottom, but this ship, it's hard to believe, I'm thinking it could travel at 38 knots, which translates to almost 50 miles an hour. Wow. It weighs 3,000 tons. It had 395 men on it. And you can imagine you could water ski being one of these. It's faster than my Bayliner. But anyway, it was just loaded with weaponry to deal impact to any enemy in the air, under the sea, on the sea, or on land, and that's what we did. So this is it. We carried 10 giant torpedo tubes right here, which were 2,000-pound warheads that could take out a battleship if they hit them square. We had 5 big 5-inch cannon, one, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we bristled with depth charges for anti-submarine warfare back here. So no matter where you went, there was some way of dealing with an enemy force. And as its name implied, it was a weapon of fierce proportion. I have to take a drink of water here, I'm talking too fast. So anyway, after leaving Pearl Harbor and being very excited about everything at sea, besides got seasick one time very bad, everyone did. We had a storm off California and the Farallon Islands, and being a boot sailor like I was, I got very seasick, but that was the last time. One time, some men were chronic seasick and had to be discharged. They couldn't be at sea, but I managed to survive that too. After training and schooling, we headed out to face the enemy, and my first experience was one of the 3 major battles that my ship actually took part in. And that was the Philippine Sea Battle. The Japanese, as you know, had occupied the Philippines, enslaved the poor people that were there. And MacArthur said he would be back, and he did come back. And we had our first battle there, and it was largely at sea. The Japanese Navy was still very strong at that time, and we had Task Force 58 with their big battle fleet from America, and we took on whatever the Japanese Navy had there and drove them out of there. And MacArthur went in, and remember the picture with his pipe and his sunglasses? And we took back the Philippines, the first stepping stone in the long trip all the way to Tokyo. Hope that's friendly. I didn't mean to start the war all over. But after the Philippine Islands, we secured that, and our brave forces occupied it, and we had again a beachhead there. And by the way, I would pay tribute to the brave Filipino people. They were amazing. They were immediately taken over by the Japanese, but the men went into the woods and jungles and became guerrilla fighters. And when we joined them there, they joined our forces, and we got the Japanese out of there in a hurry. From there came our next trip. We had heard rumblings or echoes of what was to be Iwo Jima. That's the one that you no doubt have all seen, such historic, iconic pictures and tales of. And believe me, it was probably the fiercest battle of all World War II. I know in Normandy, which was honored, I guess, this week with a memorial, was a bad one, and Europe had some, but Iwo Jima was a stupid little island, 6 miles long, and it was shaped like a pork chop. And the end of the pork chop, the fat end, was where Mount Suribachi was. You've heard that word. That's where the Marines put the flag up. One Navy man, too, by the way, put the flag up on Iwo Jima. But I remember on the opening morning, our big battleships and carriers were flying in constantly, just destroying what they thought was the enemy on that island. And we hadn't even made a nick in them, we thought. We had them. But instead, they had dug in deeply into this mountain. By saying I'm speaking of the Japanese now. So we invaded on a February morning with bombardment. My destroyer was in so close I could watch the action right from my gun. We were bombarding Mount Suribachi with these big 5-inch cannon. And could hardly see the island for fire. Little did we know that we hadn't even scratched the surface of the Japanese in there. But the poor Marines and 10th Army that were in there did find it out. We landed them in LSTs on the beach at Iwo Jima on the opening day, and it was all quiet. Nothing happened. And the Marines were coming in LSTs and dropping thousands of our troops in the water and on the beach. They got on the beach, and the beach was all volcanic ash from Mount Suribachi. They tried to dig foxholes, it was like digging in the water. And the minute they got settled on the beach, the Japanese opened up with the deadliest barrage that I could ever imagine. It was a picture of horror. And the Marines and Army and Navy ships were hit by fire from Mount Suribachi that we didn't even know had been in there. How we missed it in our intelligence, I don't know. But anyway, the Marines stuck it out. They managed after 39 days, to make the story short on Iwo, 39 days, 24/7, they fought. The Navy was making runs. The Air Force was flying in and bombing that mountain, trying to drive them out of there, all for a piece of real estate only 6 miles long, a volcanic ash island. But it had one strategic airstrip. That's why it was important that we take it. We were having a long, hard time flying to bomb Tokyo in Japan all the way from Pearl Harbor. So we needed islands for air bases. And we finally took it after 39 days of night and day battle there. And you've all seen the picture of the flag raising on Suribachi, the mountain, when the Marines climbed up there and we had taken the island over. And that particular battle victory for us was what changed the direction of the war, I thought, because we had an airstrip. Our big B-29s couldn't land there, it was too small an airstrip, but the B-25s and smaller bombers could land there, and we began to absolutely incinerate Tokyo. I know this sounds like horrible things, but some of the things that were going on were horrible, and war is never anything but horrible. When you, like Donald Trump says, horrible, he calls it horrible. And it was horrible to see that, but after that, we began to land planes there and had a regular round-the-clock bombing of Japan. And I was almost sorry when I heard of some of the incinerations we did of some of the cities, even with our B-29s. Tokyo was a burnt, crispy toast by the time they got done with them. But we still had tremendous activity with the Japanese because they were flying in regularly until we came to Okinawa, which to me was the worst battle of all. That would be the third one of the major conflicts that I personally was in. Our destroyer was there, and we were getting very close to Japan, so the Air Force, Japan's remaining Air Force, could attack us easily from Japan to Okinawa. We invaded Okinawa one Sunday morning, and at that point, for 90-some days, our destroyer was 24/7 again, but not only our destroyer, but a huge task force of American Navy, Marines, and 10th Army in the bloodiest battle of World War II. I had copied some statistics here. We lost 50,000 men on Okinawa. 50,000 men. We lost 6,800 on Iwo Jima. We had 19,000 wounded men on Iwo Jima alone. Take these two little islands. Japanese lost 4 times that many. Iwo Jima, the Japanese lost 20,000. And we took 2,400 more captives that didn't want to commit suicide like most of them did when the war was over. But after all of that time, that was from February till almost August, that we were involved between Iwo Jima and Okinawa. In the meantime, the battle was still raging in Europe, and was getting close to the end over there, because our forces in Europe we had taken care of the Third Reich pretty well by then. We came to the end of the war in Okinawa, and in the process acquired 2 big airstrips that could handle our B-29s. And that was the beginning of the very end for Japan, because we were only from here to Wausau away from Japan when we were there. And after we drove the Japanese out of there and killed, the numbers are staggering. It's almost terrible to even mention people that died that many. After that, we began a procedure to head for Japan itself. The largest American fleet you could ever imagine took to sea with thousands upon hundreds of thousands of Marines and Army and Navy heading straight for Tokyo. And believe it or not, on August 14th, our ship stopped. We were heading for Japan. We had secured Okinawa. We were bombing Japan round the clock. August 14th, our ship stopped. I wondered, why are we doing this? The ships all came to a stop. And our captain came on the PA system and he said, "The war is over." And we looked and see, was he joking? And he said, I didn't even know what an atomic bomb was. But we had dropped the first of 2 atomic bombs and completely destroyed Nagasaki and Hiroshima in 2 separate days. Hundreds of thousands of Japanese people died in that blast. the fiery, horrible thing. And when I think of it, that bomb now is but the trigger of what we have, the hydrogen weaponry now. And the war ended like that. It was the happiest day of my life, by the way. In fact, I said to myself, if I ever get married, be in August 14th. And I did. Well, it was an experience that is 7 years old for me now. It's a musty, dusty one just for like Ralph and Harriet. If some of it you recall, I think of the veterans that are back now that come back with post-stress problems and how they face another era of combat to save the freedoms we have. And it's still going on, as you know. We are in a precarious situation even now in our country, but we're handling it as we always do. After we got we steamed right into Tokyo Bay, by the way. I was there for the surrender ceremony. That was really a highlight also for me. See that huge American Navy fleet parked all over Tokyo Bay and watch the Japanese hand in their cookies right there. So, and then from there on, it was a trip back home for me. I'll still never forget the time I came back home under this Golden Gate Bridge, and I made it. I was coming home. Some of my friends never made it. We lost men at Iwo Jima on my ship that were buried at sea, which is a very sad thing to see. We didn't send our dead home. We just buried them right at sea. And that's a sad thing to witness. But it was all over. And I came back here to beautiful Manitowish Waters. And what have I been here? 65 years now. So I'm going to be a really icon around the neighborhood, I guess. And I was fortunate enough in the military to have received a GI Bill opportunity to go to college. I went to college and earned a whole pile of degrees and came up here to teach in Minocqua. And I taught for 40 years at Lakeland High School, one high school. Some of the people here, like Sarah and others, I actually have been their teacher. I would like to, by the way, compliment them on this nice program this evening and the display they've set up over there. They've done a wonderful job at honoring vets of all eras. So good for you, Janelle and group. So anyway, I'm back home and retired 26 years now. And I'm 91 years old. You never know it by looking at me. Or Ralph or Harriet. But I think it's the Wisconsin Manitowish Waters air that keeps people like us preserved up here after that ordeal. One footnote, last May, just about a year ago, Paul Lemkiel, who was a volunteer here, and Brian Jopik, the reporter from the Lakeland Times, were among 87 veterans that flew to Washington on the National Honor Flight. What an experience. So have Ralph and Harriet have made the trip. What a wonderful thing, all donated by people like you. All expenses paid. I couldn't believe that we flew to Washington and back in one day and saw Arlington Cemetery, the nation's capital, and all the memorials, and it was the most wonderfully planned program I've ever seen. If any of you vets, you younger ones now, they're taking more Vietnam vets now that took us by older age on down. Go, make sure you make the trip. It's an experience you'll never forget. And that about sums up my experiences. There were many more, but to tie it all up, that long a period of my life into a short speech here would be almost impossible. But a lot of the memories have faded, but some stay. And I'm glad to share some with you. Thank you.
As you can see, we all honor you and we all love you. And to all the veterans, in other words, as well. And I would I would like to open everything up for questions. Are you up for questions?
Absolutely.
Or the answers? Yes, yes. And I think, did you point out your uniform too? So, your uniform is right over there. And that was for marching in the parades and, or whatever you had to.
Whenever we left the base. we
Yeah,
had to wear
you had to
that.
wear those. Oh, Ralph's is on the left and Harriet's, yours is on the right? Okay, okay.
Back there.
Harriet, Harriet, can you hear me? Would you show them your uniform, the sneaky things that are inside your uniform?
I'll show 'em.
I'll help you out with that.
Well, when we went to Mercer, A. Kranz was the teacher, and I wish I would have brought that picture along, because they would try our, the students tried our uniforms on, they really looked good. Anyway, they all said, this is what she wants me to show you. This is a battle that we were in, the battle stars, Ralph had won. That was a commendation, I thought, or something. But what the kids are interested in was inside, I had that. And they wanted to know what that was all about. And that was, we had a patient, and sometimes you have patients and they just really think that you are the greatest, you know. And they would give you their things to wear next to your heart. And someone gave me that. And this caduceus means that she produces. Now that's medical, see.
Okay, the pen.
Yeah, right. Ralph has a lot more. And then on here are the hash marks. And of course, every 6 months is how long you were there. That's it.
Okay, it's up here for everyone to see.
And then that's Ralph. And then he can tell you, this is what they call the Sam Brown bill. Ralph, you'd have to tell them what they have here.
Here, I'll let you go ahead.
If you can see.
The Sam Brown belt is and parades and that in the United States.
Yeah, we had to wear this whenever we left the base.
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to wear that very long because they sent me overseas. I got out of school I'd taken ROTC and I had engineers commission, and they sent me out on about the 3 days after I graduated. I had 3 days to get my affairs in order. And then I landed in Fort Sheridan, and I went up to Cat Grant for whatever reason, shots or something. And the next thing I was on the troop train going to New Jersey. And then about 2 days after that, I was going by the Statue of Liberty. So I didn't have too much time to wear my uniform. But anyway, so then we landed up in the Firth of Clyde, and we crossed the North Atlantic, which was very rough at that time. And I didn't happen to get seasick, but so many of our fellow passengers were seasick, and so it was a mess.
When he talks about getting seasick, when we were going over, all the ones that didn't get seasick had to go down and take care of the ones that were sick. I wasn't, but
Oh, boy.
You like that? But anyway, so that was it was an interesting time. I think of the time before I went into the service. You know, everyone was, you know, on our side. All the people at home were doing the best they could to prepare for the war, and they were getting things. And a lot of them went without, I know, a lot of good food, just so that we would have food. It was certainly a wonderful effort on the part of our country.
And talking about the effort, it was a different war. Everyone was loyal to your country. Everyone was doing something, and I remember my mother was making bandages that they were sending over. And of course, we didn't have any kind of communications like you have now. So we'd get a letter about 2 weeks. But everyone, so I don't think that we can say that we did any more than you did, anyone there, because everyone here was working as hard as we were over there.
I just thought of a footnote I'd like to mention to show you how small the world really is. Just this past month, I received a phone call from a man in Rhinelander, and his name is Ray Novotny, and he said, among other things on the phone, "Are you Forrest Johnson?" "Yes, I am." "Were you on the USS Rooks during World War II at Okinawa?" "Yes, I was." And he said, "I think if it weren't for you and your ship, I wouldn't be here today." And I said, how could that possibly be? And I'll give you a brief account of what happened. I've become a very close friend of his now, but at Iwo Jima on April 6th, our whole fleet, including my ship and his dad's, his father was on the USS Hyman DD-773, just like mine. And they had taken a direct hit from a kamikaze. The kamikazes were, by the way, I didn't mention them, but they were the most horrible, frightening aspect of World War II to me. We shot down 6 on my birthday on April 15th. And I can't believe how many of our sailors and servicemen went to the bottom because of the kamikaze. They were a suicide plane, divine wind they called themselves, just enough gas to make one run. And they would plow into a destroyer like mine, which were very lightly armored. And as a result, the damage would be catastrophic. We lost more men from the kamikazes than the invasion itself. But anyway, to come back to my story, Mr. Novotny said his father was an electrician's mate on this destroyer, and he asked me if I remembered a day. Can you all hear me all right? This thing's going in and out. Yeah. He asked me if I remembered a day on April 6th when we went to the aid of a crippled destroyer, just like ours. And I said, yes, I think I do. He said, my dad was on that ship, and he said he wrote a book. His father wrote a beautiful book called In the Wake of the Jelly Bean. Jelly Bean is the code name of the destroyer his dad was on. Brilliant book about World War II. But anyway, he described how my ship was called to the aid of his dad's ship, and how we pulled up in front of theirs because they took a direct hit right here between the stacks. Hit, exploded, killed about 40 or 50 of their men instantly, destroyed their whole sick bay and doctor and medical staff. So we pulled up alongside and put our doctors on board. And I begin to remember it as he was telling me the story that his dad had written about it in the book that I'm speaking about. And we've met 3 or 4 times now, and the crew that's left of that ship meet in Pennsylvania somewhere every year, and they invited me to go out as an honorary member. Wow. But and I have a copy of the book. He brought it over to give me a copy of his dad's book. But I still remember that destroyer. That is a horrible thing to see. It was crippled in the water. The Japanese had blown out the whole center part of the destroyer and killed I don't know how many men. And we transferred our doctor and our pharmacist mates by breeches buoy, they called it, over to help their wounded. In the meantime, we took a station right off their bow and shot the living, you know what, out of the Japanese as they kept coming in trying to finish her off. And finally, we got them back under power and towed them out of there with another destroyer. 2 other destroyers came in to help us, but we circled them like a mother hen. But imagine that story came back just this past month to me. And little did I know that a man from Rhinelander was the son of that guy. And he said, when he said, you know, I don't think we'd have been here, meaning himself, if it hadn't been for you and your crew on that one day. So, but that was, but I do remember the day after he recalled it.
How did he find you?
Pardon?
How did he find you?
He said he had, Brian Jopik, I give him credit, he said he had read the story about my activity on the USS Rooks in the South Pacific, and he remembered his dad had mentioned in his book the story of the USS Rooks coming to their aid. And so he called me, and from there on we've met 3 or 4 times now and become very close friends and so forth. But what a ironic situation to have that come right back. It was a pleasant surprise to know that we'd helped this crippled destroyer, and even though they lost, I don't know how many of their men, they just blew the internal part of this part of the destroyer right out. It was just sitting there on fire and so on. And we aided them and got them towed to a safer harbor somewhere later on. And from there on, I don't know what happened to the ship, but his dad survived the whole thing. Well, that's just a footnote to the story to show that it didn't end even there, yes.
Did you suffer a lot of hearing loss?
Yes, I did. Huh? I still remember going to my audiologist because I have tinnitus ringing in this ear all the time, but I've learned to live with it. And I told him, I said, I've got this tinnitus in my left ear, and he said, well, were you ever around any loud noise? I said, no, I don't think so. And then he said, were you in the service? I said, oh my God, yeah. And I remembered, and he attributes it to that. Left ear, I still have some fairly good hearing yet anyway.
Yeah.
But the noise wasn't unbelievable when we were bombarding 24/7, all five guns going at once. Any other questions?
Judy, I know you've been raising your hand.
I've
Judy.
heard so many people from World War II were quiet for so long
Yeah.
about their experiences. Many said they didn't want to burden their children. When did you all begin sharing your stories?
I think only since recently when people stop and say thank you for your service. The ones I really feel sorry for are the Vietnam vets. They came back and nobody would even talk to them. They thought the war was so inglorious, and it was in a way. But why blame them? They did their part. The vets did all they could. But I think like anything traumatic or really painful, time erases a lot of the not wanting to talk about it. I still remember my kids found a diary I kept. I never talked to them about it, but I had kept a diary of experiences I had. And I came down the basement one day, and there were my two daughters were sitting reading this diary and whispering to them. I said, what are you girls doing? And they had found my diary, and some of it was pretty horrific what I had written, stuff that I'd seen, and I'd write little bits in there, and I'd hidden it in the basement, but they found it and were reading it. And so then I did have a little talk with them about some of the uglier parts of the war. And there were lots of those, but the good part was when I came under the Golden Gate Bridge, coming back from San Francisco, and saw those lights up there, and I knew I'd made the trip both ways, in, out, and back. A lot of our friends did not. I want to thank you all for coming.
Thank you, guys.
Were there other questions at all tonight?
Janelle?
Yes.
I just wanted to say, when I worked in operating room, and when we went to France, to Paris, we didn't know all about their autoclaves and their equipment in the operating room. So this French nurse stayed on, and we kept in touch all the while. And we went back on the 50th anniversary, and they had saved all the Christmas cards that we sent to them. It was our children's pictures and that. And 50 years later, we went back, and they had us over for lunch. And the lunch started at noon, and it ended about 6 o'clock at night. They take one course, and they take everything off, and she had all kinds of dishes out in the kitchen. And so I said to her son, well, we're going to do the dishes now. She did all the cooking. And he said, oh no, men never cook, never, I've never done any dishes. I said, you better start learning. But anyway, so we still keep in touch. Every Christmas I hear from them. And they told us how much they appreciated, what we did. And we did, that France would not be free if it wasn't for the Americans, and we wouldn't either.
Great.
Thank you very much. There are a lot of different items up here, and I urge you all to stay and look at everything and talk more to Ralph and Harriet and Corey, and also Stu. Stu is in the back corner. I know you really didn't want to be singled out, but Stu has many items, many interesting items here in the Sullivan Room of World War II and then some various other wars. And also a Japanese flag that's signed. It's made of silk. Stu has it in a bag, and it's something really amazing to see. Do you have it right there, Stu? Okay. Oh yeah, if you want to bring it up here, Stu, you get in front of everybody.
Wasn't planning to, but sure.
Okay. And evidently these flags would be carried with the Japanese on their person, and if they died in war, then an American picked it up, or somebody. But they had it all signed. There is even some blood on there, too.
Just had a thing on PBS on that, and they're handing the flags back to their families.
Oh, yes, there was, on PBS and on Sunday morning program this past Sunday, they talked about those.
Right, so the soldiers would capture these, take these off of the dead Japanese soldiers, as Janelle said. And all the different kanji characters mean something different. They were written by family members. The prayer flag is another term for these types of flags. There's a book out in the front, open to one of the pages, that shows a typical flag. The larger characters across the top have a certain meaning, which I forget at the moment, but they're fairly common to these types of flags. And all the other characters are from family and friends wishing them well in war, basically. But it was a big deal for the American soldiers, whether it's Navy, Marines, Army, whatever, to bring these back. Very important to them.
I have one also.
Do you? Oh, great.
In Astoria, Washington, we were there last summer, and there's a huge project there where they're returning these flags to the families.
That was on
PBS.
And it was on PBS too, but they had all of these, and they had some of them where they showed they knew who they were, and some when they were trying to figure out who they were, and it was very interesting.
To my knowledge, this one doesn't list the soldier's name, although it could.
Yeah.
I do have one other one that has a stamp on it that says it was Lieutenant such and such, that has the soldier's name on it. Some of them are just plain, just a meatball with nothing written on them at all. You see a variety of different things. It's kind of amazing to think, it came from halfway around the world 70 years ago.
Thank you. And again, I urge you to look at everything here that our dear vets had brought, our World War II veterans have brought, and also in the library, the pictures of our veterans as well. And Harriet has another thing to say.
I just want to say one thing. Kate Kranz is out there, and when we came back, she had her, where are you, Kate? Stand up. Kate Kranz, every year, when they were studying world history, she would invite Ralph and I to Mercer, where her class, they were juniors in high school, and we'd go through all of this. And they were so interested, and they were so good to us. They had food for us and everything. And I just want to thank Kay, because they kept the young people knowing what was going on.
Yes, and don't forget the food here. Lots of good treats. Okay, yeah.
I have a question of Forrest. Forrest, you said you had a diary that, I'm here.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that your daughters were reading.
Yes.
Have you ever thought of having that transcribed and sharing it with other people, or is it too personal?
A lot of it is highly personal, and that's why I actually had sort of concealed it in the basement. There a lot of it were the wandering thoughts and lonelinesses of a very young guy, me, and experiences that were highly distasteful of it. Burial at sea was always tough to see. They didn't send vets home for a funeral because we couldn't in the South Pacific. Bodies were just dropped into the sea, and every time that happened, that was a traumatic thing, stuff like that.
But those types of things are the other side of war that, not the
Some
beautiful parts. And maybe
I'd be happy to share them, but I think that some of it might be almost too personal, in a way. That's the reason why I didn't want to share it with my own family until the girls found the thing, and then I had to kind of modify what I had written in there. Some of the anger I felt at the Japanese, which took me a long time to get over. I still don't buy a Toyota. I know that's not nice to say, but you carry old prejudices a long way. They weren't prejudices, they were the enemy, and they had done something horrible to us, killed hundreds of thousands of our men, died because of them. And I had a hard time forgetting that.
Corey, you mentioned the fact that you were angry. We were too, and when I came back, I had a Nazi flag, and I was so angry I got rid of it.
Yeah, that's understandable. That's one of those things you do get by after time heals all, You get, now, we got Kubotas and Yakahashis and Toyotas and Hondas, and the Japanese are very nice. In fact, Susie Bauer might even remember this story. I worked for Lefebvre's Resort. Some of you probably remember that Lefebvre's Resort, one of the oldest historic resorts here. And he's my father-in-law, Ali Lefebvre, is but my wife. And we had a Japanese family. When I first came out of the service, I worked for her dad in the summers. We got a Japanese family in cottage number 3, Frank Takahashi. And one of my duties was to get boats to the customers and haul the garbage and haul wood for their stove. I wouldn't do it. And I remember I had a talk with my father-in-law, and he very gently said, he said, "Forrest, you ever been picking up the garbage down at Takahashi's?" And I said, well, I just, that's how far it had lasted. This was long ago, when I hadn't been out of the service very long, when I carried that feeling with me. It's gone now, by the way. I have no such thoughts about fellow human beings anymore. Maybe the ISIS, I'm not sure about them. I'm starting to maybe I'll get my uniform back on again.
There was a question here.
Well, I don't really have a question, it's a comment, but my father was in World War II, and he was a prisoner of war.
Oh, boy.
He was captured at the Battle of Bulge. But at least 15 years after he was out of the service, we were in our backyard. We lived in the town of Marshfield, and a plane, just when you said about that plane, a plane came over, and I was quite young, but I can remember my dad diving to the ground.
Oh, yeah, that takes a while.
Just that, whatever sound stirred that memory in his.
Yeah.
He never talked about the war, never.
It's like whoever asked that question, most vets don't. The ones that talk about it really weren't usually in the main front line of it. Some of them talk but weren't there. The ones who really been in the front lines, like I was, and Ralph and Harriet, it takes that little prying. Old Jake Scrobot, some of you know him, was the chief gunner's mate, and he and I would exchange stories privately sometimes and talk about experiences in the war. And he was a career Navy chief petty officer and saw a lot of action out there, a lot more. He was in 22 years in the service, so. But it's hard to scratch out old traumas. They don't go easily, but.
A lot of those things are buried in your mind. I remember we came home and I met Harriet, and we were out once, and we were going to walk in a field, and I wouldn't walk. I'd only stay on the sidewalk where people walk.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Because of bombs.
Yeah. The landmines. It's one of those things that's automatic. You just wouldn't do it.
Well, that's because you cleared so many, isn't it?
Yeah. We cleared 40,000 in one pass in Italy, in the Apennines.
And the brochure that everybody had when they first came in, it talks about you with having done that with the mines. So it's very, very interesting, good information.
Yes, we do have some of the James Bradley books for sale out there in the lobby that you could pick up in advance of the event and have autographed at that time. If anybody is interested in picking up their ticket for the event on June 30th, we have those too.
And we also want to remind everybody, if you are a World War II veteran, we welcome you to the James Bradley talk as our guests. We want you to be there as our invited guests. Do not buy tickets, you are honored guests. So we'll make sure that you get the information on that.
Very good. Well, I'll close this part of the program and let you browse around, talk with Florian, Ralph, and Harriet, look at all the various items we have here and in the library. And thank you so much for coming and honoring our amazing World War II veterans. We're very proud of you.